Okay. I cannot see chat because I'm presenting. So Marjorie, you're in charge of chat, maybe?
Yeah, I'll keep an
Okay.
eye on it.
So some housekeeping first. There is a link to the slide deck. It's a bit.ly link, Fox-Valley-Speakers-WS, and that's also going to be posted in Meetup for people. So that way you can have the slide deck, tomorrow or the next day or tonight. If you're looking over your ideas again, you can get some of the prompts and some of the points we're going to talk about. There are images in our slide deck, but they are purely decorative, so we won't be describing them. They're just for looks. And then questions, pop your questions in chat, and then Marjorie and I are going to share our information. So feel free to reach out to us in Drupal Slack, or in MidCamp Slack, or in our LinkedIn pages. Which leads me to, I'm Amy June. I work at opensource.com, and you can see my LinkedIn there. And I help organize a couple of Drupal events. And I'm not going to mention that I won the Aaron Winborn Award because people are probably tired of hearing that. And pass it to Marjorie.
Sorry.
Hey everyone, I'm Marjorie Freeman. I am a community manager for Enable Architect, which is one of opensource.com's newer sister sites on the Red Hat Digital Communities team. I like to think of myself as a participant of a speaker workshop that got invited to speak, and now I'm doing them. And so I always say that because I used to be, speaking I'm a work in progress. So I'm happy to present, and I'm also happy to learn from you all. So thanks for having me here. All right, so as we begin, let me get my screen right. We want to invite you to add your pronouns to your Zoom name. We don't want to make any assumptions. We ask that you to turn, it looks like I can't see I don't have the grid view right now, but if you could turn your camera off if you can, turn your camera on, excuse me, and it just helps us feel more connected so we can see everyone's faces, and if we'll make a joke, we can see if it landed or not. And this is going to be an interactive workshop. There will be chances near the end to share your answers to one of the exercises out loud. And before then, if you're not speaking, just please stay muted. And we just encourage everyone to use the chat. You can move around and get up if you need to, just raise your hand, or I will try to keep an eye on the chat. And in case you leave early, the discussion will be, like Amy June said, on the Drupal Slack.
Okay, so now we're kind of moving into all the things that we have housekeeping done. We're going to do a couple of introductions and an icebreaker. That's just going to happen in chat. We're going to look at finding a topic, writing a pitch, and creating a talk. And time permitting, depending on how long this takes, or how long we're engaged with each other, we'll talk about becoming a better speaker and creating great slides. And then also just a note for folks, live transcripts are turned on in Zoom. If you find it helpful, if it's distracting, you can turn them off by clicking the live transcript hide subtitle button. But Zoom might have been updated since then. I don't use it very often, but it used to come up by default. So what we'd like people to do is, so this is another slide that talks about what we're talking about. So, why we're holding the workshop, we're not only holding it for people who want to talk at MidCamp, but we're also holding the workshop for people who might be too timid or come from marginalized or excluded groups. We're going to talk about what topics MidCamp is looking for specifically. We're going to dispel some of the myths of why you haven't become a speaker or what you think being a speaker is. And then in chat, we'll talk about why we want to speak as well. So in the chat, feel free to share your name and your role, your Drupal experience or your tech experience, if any. What's your speaking experience, if any? And then for the icebreaker, what song did you last listen to? I did not listen to a song last, but we've had a Descendants song stuck in our head that we've been singing various versions of it. Called Suburban Home. I don't know if anyone knows it, but it's by the Descendants, and we've been like making up our own words to it because that's always fun. So Marjorie.
Right. So we are holding this workshop for a couple of reasons. A disproportionately large number of speakers at Drupal events and conferences look alike. And that's not just Drupal, that's a lot of different events and come from the same background. That means that the speakers don't always represent the people sitting in the audience taking in all the presentations. So this, we hold workshops and stuff like this for people who from marginalized or underrepresented backgrounds to share their thoughts and their opinions and perspectives and get their voice out there and reflect the community that we know is out there. We just are trying to give groups more of a platform to share about their knowledge. Drupal is amazing in that it is open source, and so all sorts of people use it, and we want a more fair representation of the users in the people who are speaking. One of the ways in which Drupal is being shaped is by the people who speak about it publicly. Many marginalized and underrepresented folks by nature of having had different life experiences would approach problems differently, just as how a developer's point of view may differ from a user's point of view. So our viewpoints, I told you I learned something when I come to these workshops, and I'm getting used to speaking, so please forgive me. You have experiences that Amy, June, or I may not have necessarily had, so we're all learning something from someone today. By bringing more diversity to the people at the podium, there's a better chance of bringing folks in who are straddling several different roles and thus creating unique experiences. And Amy Jean, you can go to the next slide.
Okay, so specifically MidCamp, we're looking at the tracks that are being held at MidCamp. The first one is Site Builder, the Site Builder audience. Those are the folks who create websites using the UI and not necessarily programmatically, and they use the contributed module. So presentations in this category focus on what comes out of the box with Drupal and less about what can be done with custom code. Front end is another track. The front end developer focuses on the client facing or the user facing side, the presentation layer of the website. So these topics might include CSS, JavaScript, accessibility, user experience, graphic design. So there might be things like Drupal specific topics, including theming and Twig. Backend, focused on the functionality layer, the backend developers on the opposite side of the front end, and they're working with like the guts of the web application. And for Drupal, this means, talking about PHP or custom modules, migrations, big thing right now is migrations, Drupal 7 to Drupal 10, headless Drupal. That's the absence of the front end, so maybe that's considered front end. I don't know, but there's back end and front end. Tracks, DevOps, this is probably the least specific Drupal or the least Drupal specific track that MidCamp has. And it really covers the technical and philosophical practices of deployment processes, if you can consider philosophy in there. You talk about deployment processes, servers, continuous integration, testing, things like that. We have the end users and content admin. These are our content creators. These are the folks that are in the Drupal websites after the front end and the back end people are done. Content admins benefit from beginning level sessions on the basic concepts of the Drupal CMS, from that end user's perspective, along with maybe some more in-depth sessions on things like analytics or search engine optimization, SEO, and content marketing. And of course, business, we are very interested in sessions pertaining to how you run your Drupal-focused business, how you market, how you manage, and how you deliver Drupal services and the products. This should be the focus of these non-technical sessions. And of course, we have project managers, along with our developers, we have product or project managers. Possible topics include building a team, planning, estimating, budgeting process, resourcing allocations, sharing your processes with how you get the job done, methodologies, what software are you using to help with their tickets, things like that. And of course, design, what our website looks like. Designing for the web has evolved as our content management systems have. So the design track would have topics focusing on designing in the browser, mobile first or responsive design, and accessibility. Accessibility is really important. And right now, accessibility is changing a lot. So we welcome any sessions that are talking about accessibility in the next couple of years. And community, community session might be more about the people that make our community happen. This is lessons from other open source projects, maybe historical perspectives on the Drupal community, your user group planning tips, how you did contributions in your lessons learned. And then what are we looking for, is kind of a broad question, but it's ultimately MidCamp would love talks on anything that you're passionate about. Accessibility, business cases, being human, DevOps, security, object-oriented programming. Like Marjorie said, your perspective is different than everyone else's, and we all have something to share. Oh, I named off some of these, front-end development best practices, newer CSS. CSS is always changing. What browsers are supported are always changing. And then really the goal of this workshop is for you to apply to your local meetups and to your Drupal camps. And for those who feel ready in the future, we'd love to see more people talk at DrupalCon. And Andy talked a little bit about it, but you can find, oh, actually this slide is out of date. I have drupalcal.com on there. While that still exists, we are using that community/events page more often. Thank you, Andy, for reminding me that I don't always update my slides as needed. And Marjorie's going to go over some of the myths that we're going to bust through tonight.
Yeah, so there's a lot of myths around, public speaking, and a lot of them you're not alone in feeling them. A lot of them are very common. Everyone has their own reasons for not writing, and we're going to call some out, and if any of them resonate with you, let us know in the chat. So this first one, not an expert. I say that one a lot, imposter syndrome. That's okay. You don't have to be an expert. Everyone has a different idea of what expert means. No one knows everything, and everyone has something to learn. You can know more about your topic than your audience knows. You can find a topic where you have knowledge that your audience does not. I always tell people from a writer's perspective, if you're writing about it, then it reinforces what you know about something, and you obviously know about it, right? And so somebody reading it is going to learn something new from whatever it is you've written. Same thing for speaking. I just have to remember that somebody came to my presentation because they wanted to learn something new, or they find it interesting in some way. And so it's always good to keep that in the back of your head. Myth number 2, people will ask questions I can't answer and I will look like a fool. Yes, people very well may ask questions you can't answer, but that's okay too. Your audience understands that not everyone knows everything, and it can be hard to think on your feet. The audience is sympathetic. I know personally when somebody's speaking, I'm like, bless you, because speaking is difficult. I could not be in your situation right now. So kudos to you. And, just keep that in the back of your mind whenever you are speaking. Myth number 3, I'm too nervous to speak. Your audience gets that too. After all, most of them don't have the bravery to speak. First of all, practice, practice, practice. The more you practice in front of pets, family, friends, in the mirror, small audiences, the less nervous you'll be. But if you are still nervous, that's okay as well. Everyone gets nervous in front of audiences, and that's just a part of being human. Keep in mind that your audience is on your side and they want you to succeed. Myth 4, I have failed if everyone in the audience isn't totally engaged. I had my first, I'd say, major presentation, like not in school, at Drupal Camp Asheville last year. And I actually, before, I wasn't really scared of the talk itself. I was scared that people aren't going to show up. And I was just going to be like, well, no, I was scared too many people were going to show up and that my voice would shake and I was going to sound like I was going to cry. And then my whole team showed up and maybe 3 people I didn't know. And then I was like, well, maybe my pitch wasn't that interesting or, but I got tons of questions afterwards. And, Amy June had great questions. And, sometimes when you're speaking, you look out in the audience and it will look like everyone is bored. You never know what's on somebody's mind. So just focus on what you came there to do and just trust that they came to hear you speak. Myth 5, a talk followed by a Q&A is the only format I can share to my knowledge. I can use to share my knowledge. This isn't true. There are plenty of other ways to share your expertise at Drupal events. You could lead a group discussion, lead a workshop, or put together a panel. Some events offer the opportunity to do lightning talks, which are usually about 10 minutes. This is a great format if you're nervous, but it's okay to talk fast and get it over with really quickly. So why haven't you spoken? Do you have another reason for not writing that wasn't listed? If yes, you can chat it. You can put it in the chat. We have a couple of questions to help you come up with some reasons, but what are some things you're worried about? Why haven't you talked at a local Drupal event or Drupal Camp or DrupalCon? And if you have only talked once, why did you not do it again? And I'll give people a moment to. Yeah, that's always one of mine, that especially at technical events, being not a technical person, but working with technical people, I'm just like, I don't know if my topic will resonate. That's always in the back of my mind when I am thinking about joining a conference. But all right, there are reasons people don't want to speak, but what about reasons people do want to speak? Here's another discussion question for you. Why do you want to speak? Some common reasons are to be seen as an authority in your field, share your knowledge with others, build your confidence, give back to the community, meet people, be a part of the community, and travel. I know that one of the reasons I chose, besides like getting closer to Amy June and learning from her. One of the reasons that I decided to speak last year at Drupal Camp Asheville was to build my confidence and become a part of the community. I hear nothing but great things about Drupal, so I was like, let me see what this is all about. And I definitely felt very at home. So the more I do this, the better it gets. So I will see. Okay, I'm trying to look at chat in percent. Sorry.
Sorry, Marjorie.
I was just making sure I didn't miss anything in the chat.
Okay. Of course, it's my turn to talk and my wife is in the kitchen making a bunch of noise, but we'll forgive
We can't hear
her.
anything.
Finding a topic. Okay. So in this section, we're going to talk about the different talk formats. Remember, one of those myths was just, that long kind of lecture style talk. We'll talk about different formats. We'll do a big brain dump exercise for all the goods, the bads, and the uglies. We'll also work on narrowing the topics that we come up with, refining our chosen topic, and maybe sharing our topics in the chat. And I want to encourage folks, like I have a notebook for every time I do this workshop with all the things I have written down. So have a piece of paper with you or have your notepad open on your computer, because we're going to do this exercise where we're going to write down a bunch of stuff and then kind of whittle away at it. So whatever's more comfortable for you. So there's a lot of those like how to brain dump sessions, how to make an extension might be, someone walking through how to make it, maybe even some live coding, a demo, and then at the end are there questions. But we found that not everyone can really access that information readily. Some people can't walk away with those big brain dump sessions. Sometimes people feel overwhelmed or they're not remembering everything that they learned. So we just want to talk a little bit about those other talks that promote like story-based learning, talking about how you learn something, for example, means other people can also learn how to learn. And then, listed up here are some various formats. There's the how-to. This is your standard way that the talks happen. There's discussions, you're the facilitator of the room and you talk about a topic and the audience discusses it together. Sometimes in Drupal events, they're called BOFs or birds of a feather, where there's a group of people all talking about, topics. We have panels. This is multiple people answering questions on the same topic with the facilitator kind of guiding the Q&A. Story-based. This could be something you learned, mistakes that you've made, or any other narrative format. Case studies, we all love a good case study, don't we? This is that story of how you created one thing in particular. This could be how you used a specific tool to migrate. It could be how you built a specific website, why you chose the technologies you did. And then we have workshops. These are sort of extended sessions where it's more hands-on learning, where people bring their laptops and create a thing as you go. And remember, any of these talks, like the how-to and the story-based or the case studies or the workshops, it can be more than one person. It can be 2 or 3 people, and that can be really engaging. And it takes a lot of pressure off of you too, especially when you feel like you're not the expert. You can talk about one section of something and someone else can talk about another. Okay, so now we're going to start with our brainstorm. So again, get your notepad ready, get your notebook and your pencil ready. We're going to do the brainstorm exercise, and this is where we pick as many topics as we can. We're not looking for perfect. You're not looking for perfect. You're not even looking for good ideas. This is just getting stuff out on paper. The idea is just to get them all out, to get 30 or 40 of them. Seriously, anything that comes to mind. You can write, you can draw, you can do mind maps and the bubbles and the clouds, whatever you do to summon inspiration, we'll be prompting you with questions to generate more topics. And remember, We say this a lot when we have writers submit to our websites. We can tell when you're not passionate about something and when it's sort of like a report. So it's always great to talk about what excites you or what you want to learn next, not what you think you should talk about. And also, if you're new to Drupal and you don't have answers to these yet, that's okay. You can use the prompts to imagine what your answers will be, or you can insert your specific technology or passion or project in for the word Drupal. And we'll give you a moment to start writing any ideas that are coming to mind before we start the prompts. And in a moment, I'll start the first prompt. So kind of think about what you've wanted to talk about and write those down. I'm going to take a drink while you do that.
Amy June, can people put their thoughts in chat or just write them down themselves?
We'll write them down now and get the big thing, and then maybe people can share them when we refine the topics down a little bit.
Okay.
So what got you into Drupal? What keeps you in Drupal or your passion project? What do you love about it? What do you want to learn next? Think about the first time you created a custom theme or wrote an extension or plugin. Or maybe the first time you wrote custom code. What has been the biggest challenge for you in Drupal in the last year or two? What's the last thing that you learned and how did you learn it? What was the biggest challenge you've ever had with Drupal? And then how did you overcome that challenge? What are you most passionate about when it comes to Drupal? What excites you the most? What sorts of things do you love sharing with others about Drupal? And think about what you love sharing about Drupal with others outside of the community as well. Here's a good one. What question about Drupal do you get asked by most clients, friends, and family? But think of it beyond what is Drupal, because I get that question a lot from my family. What question about Drupal do you get asked about the most? A good place to start sometimes is a list of what you want to learn, what you want to learn next. I'm going to go off the prompts a little bit and talk about this subject a little bit because sometimes the easiest way to give yourself permission or to learn about a topic is to speak about it because you want to be that expert. So sometimes some of the greatest topics are new technologies that you research because you want to, learn about all you can before you give it a talk on it. So a list of what you want to learn. What's your favorite module and what solutions does it bring? Have you created something cool lately? What's a cool thing that you've created? And this is a great one for BOFs or how-tos or trainings. What are your favorite resources? Do you have a list of resources beyond, Drupal documentation? And then we're always curious because we iterate on this talk. What prompt did we not ask, which you wish we did? Okay, so y'all should have like this big block of things written down or jotted on your notepad. And Marjorie's going to kind of help you hone down topic selection.
All right. So now that you've got some good and bad or maybe ugly ideas, we're going to do an exercise where we're picking the 2 topics from your list that you think best fits the following questions. You might also find that you come up with new answers that weren't in your list. If so, go ahead and write those down too. If for some of these you don't come up with any answers, that's okay. You can just skip that one. So for this one, a story-based talk, which is basically like you're telling a story about a certain topic in a way that like you're reading a book, like you're having a conversation with the audience. I tend to like this style a lot better, but I attended a talk at QCon last year where the speaker used like Dungeons and Dragons to talk about her topic on engineering leadership, and it was really interesting. So this is a great way to engage with your audience. So try picking 2 of the topics that you don't know a lot about and have some success with. Like, I don't know much about making a module, but I've made one for custom content types. That's an example. And jot it down. For a panel or a discussion, this is basically like you could be working, like presenting with your peers, but it's when you're given a talk with a group of other people, and sometimes the audience will ask you questions, or you might have a moderator who asks you questions. You can pick 2 topics from here as well that you may not know much about, that you would have good questions for. A how-to presentation, which is similar to a case study. It's real in-depth from the beginning of a project to executing the project to the end result. Just like the other ones, kind of come up with 2 topics that you've maybe successfully worked on that you feel you could do a case study about. And then case studies. Can pick 2 topics. I spoke too soon, but pick 2 topics where you can share your personal experiences with conducting a case study. And a workshop, which is literally what you are in right now. It's very interactive. I would say one-on-one, but they're usually conducted with more than 2 people. It's immersive. So you pick 2 topics that you think you could teach to others in a hands-on manner. That would be great for running a workshop. And for anything else, pick 2 subjects on this topic in the topic list that are your favorite. All right.
Okay. Go ahead, Marjorie.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. So go ahead and pick the topic you're most excited about and the one that you think you'd like to develop further. We'll give you a couple minutes to kind of, think about that favorite topic that you can go through and just sort of, just read that list, look at what you've circled, look at what kind of talk you would want to give. We'll give you a moment and then we'll walk through another exercise. Okay, so feel free to post your topic in the chat, the one that you're most passionate about. Again, if you would like to share it out loud, you can, but this is being recorded, so we want to give people grace that they don't want to share it with the broader community, that they can post in the chat and kind of talk with each other in the chat about the topic you're most excited about. Did you work on a topic, Marjorie?
I have a topic, yes.
Do you want to share it with the group?
I will share it with the group. I was struggling with how to even ask it because I don't think I have the right word for it, but what is your favorite talk structure? Like, I guess you can give a talk about what's your favorite talk structure, but when I say talk structure, I mean, like, do you like lightning talks or panel talks or workshops and explaining like the different kinds of talks that you could give. I don't know how interesting that would be, but that's what I wrote down. And it came to mind because one of my favorite parts of Drupal Camp was the lightning talks. So.
If anybody else want to share, I dropped mine in chat. I want to talk about assisted technology next because I don't know a lot about it. Like I want to figure out like how or why different people use the assistive technology they use, because sometimes we think of screen readers, but not everyone who uses a screen reader is blind. So some of those use cases for assistive technology is what I'd like to talk about next. Okay. Since no one's sharing, we're going to work on refining the topic. So go ahead and look at that topic that you really were most passionate about, or after these questions, maybe something will spark that's different than that one and you'll pick a different one. But we kind of want to apply those 5 W's, even though one of those is an H. The who, the what, the why, the how, the when, and the where. So we're going to apply those to our specific topics. So if you have a favorite module, like say you want to present on Smart Date, or you want to present on meta tag because you're in marketing and you use it a lot, you know, let's just use like maybe the media module as an example because it's really dynamic. Who is the project for? Who is the media module for? What does the media module do? What solutions does your module or your subject or your technology bring for people? Because people love to hear about solutions. Why was it created? That's along the lines of, you know, what solution does it bring? How does it work? So not only does your module have a solution, or your favorite project or open source project have a solution, but people need to know how it works. So can you, give a brief demo? When would you use this solution? And where would you use it? So there's the, who is the media module for? What does it do? Why is it there to begin with? How does it work? When would you use it? And where would you use it? Okay, so this is where if people want to talk about their topic a little bit more, if you want any feedback, we do want to remind people that we're here empowering others. So if someone wants feedback, think about what feedback you're going to offer and be sure to say what you liked about it before suggesting an improvement. Does anyone want to talk about their topic a little bit more?
So I refined the topic that I mentioned before to make it more interesting. So how would you best describe, what is the best talk structure? And again, I don't know what the right word for that is, to describe your module. So like, how should you create the presentation to talk about your project? Like, what's the best format to talk about it? that sounds better in my head than it does coming out, but I know what I'm trying to say. So I just wanted to say that out loud.
Then also, if you want, to list a couple of topics that you're kind of on the fence about and would like help choosing, that's a discussion that you can have in chat. What are people interested in hearing?
All right, so writing your pitch. All right, so the pitch, AKA the proposal, is one of the first things that catches someone's attention. So you really want to make sure that you've captured the essence of what you want to talk about, and you've done it in a concise way. So we're going to help you come up with a great title. We'll write the pitch, first of all, come up with a great title. We'll try to do a writing exercise and present titles and pitches, some pitch ideas that you might be interested in. So in our new web multiverse, it's more important than ever to make your valuable content available to all users, regardless of how they access your site. In this kind of talk, we'll cover how responsive web design came about, the latest RDW news and trends, and some basic and not so basic techniques you can use to make your next Drupal theme a responsive one. This is intended for developers and designers who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty with a little code. This is an example of a good pitch because it told you, who you're talking to, what you're talking about, and how it intends to do that. And now we're going to talk about how to tailor your pitch. For a pitch, you want to tailor the tone of your writing and vocabulary to the specific audience and event that you're applying to. This is very important. So some ways to do that. The tone may be different. A crowd may be formal. A local event may be casual. So customize the tone of your pitch to your specific audience. Drupal meetups tend to be pretty casual. Drupal camps are often more focused on those working with Drupal, with larger events having more business leaders and decision makers. DrupalCons tend to have large numbers of business-oriented people at the event. Vocabulary. You might want to use different vocabulary depending on who you're talking to. So if you're talking to other Drupal users, you know what terms to use. If you're talking to somebody who doesn't know about Drupal and is learning about it for the first time, you may not use the same vocabulary that you would use for a fellow Drupal member. Different hooks or points of interest. You may want to stress different hooks or points of interest depending on the audience or the event. And a few extra notes about Drupal events. Playfulness in the title and description are to your advantage. Personally, it's always a great conversation starter. It loosens things up and it just makes your presentation a bit more, well, not necessarily your presentation, but that first initial contact with your talk a little bit more engaging. Be thoughtful about your title and description and how it might be taken from different people. Don't hit it political, religious, or over-sexualizing tones. Stay away from those. Nothing that would get you called out in a code or conduct violation if you ever said those things at an event. I will, again, going back to like a writer's perspective, one of the things I learned starting in my role is like references to movies or songs. You don't want to, and I'm sorry I'm making this weird face. I'm trying to not burp. um, some people may not like know what movie you're talking about or know what song you're talking about. So it's always nice to stay neutral. You can have fun with it, but just take into consideration, not everybody's going to know what you're talking about.
Yeah, goes back to that audience, of pop culture, American pop culture might not have the same impact, in your title at a European event. So yeah, localization, think about that. Yeah.
All right, there are 6 important points to take note of when writing both your outline and your pitch. So you want to direct the proposal to the attendees, not the curators, because the attendees are the ones that are, yes, the committee or whatever that's in charge of looking at your pitch when you first submit your talk to the CFP is going to see it, but you also want to realize that that's the same pitch that's going to be seen on the website or on social media or whatever. So you want to make it really engaging. Many conferences use your talk proposal as a description of your talk in their program. And so with that in mind, your target reader is the conference attendee who is reading the program. You want to tell the reader why your talk will interest them, what they will learn. The curators want to put together a great conference with compelling talks for their attendees. So your talk will be part of that package they offer. So you want to really sell it. Make sure you also research the event as well. Are there different tracks? Who is the audience? Are there lots of developers? Is it mostly for users? Is it design heavy? Different conferences have different personalities. So point 2, you want to be specific about the focus that your talk will have. Generally speaking, a shallow introduction to many things is not as interesting as a more in-depth introduction to one thing, because you want to hook the attendee in, but you also don't want to give all your information away in just your pitch. If you discuss a broader topic, do so only to set the context for what you'll focus on. That burp finally came. Point 3, pose the question your talk will answer. One strategy, pose the question your talk will answer. Often talks answer questions that start with how, why, when, and so on. An easy trick is to directly ask these questions in your proposal, leaving the reader wondering the answer, which is in turn going to hopefully make them want to attend your talk. Point 4, Amy June.
So you want to make your point as succinct as you can. If your first draft requires more than 2 paragraphs to get to the point of your topic, you should edit to narrow those things down. Take out any words that can be removed without changing the meaning. You have a lot of competition sometimes in these CFPs, so try to make a good impression quickly. If your proposal is too much work to read or understand, it might get skipped during the selection process and not even make it to the program. Now, this one is subjective, but it depends on the curators or the session selection committee. But we want to make sure that we use proper grammar, spelling, and punctuation. Now, there's exceptions to this, and a lot of conferences are being more inclusive. because not all of us come from the same background. So English might be a second language. Technology might be a second language. But in general, if you submit a sloppily written proposal, you appear careless. And it really comes across that you're not taking the opportunity seriously. You sometimes risk being rejected, on that spelling, grammar, and punctuation. Speaking requires a lot of thoughtful preparation, and curators sometimes make assumptions that if you're careless in your proposal, you might be careless in your talk as well. But again, more like DrupalCon, sometimes they'll pick some sessions and they really want to hear more about it, and they'll give sometimes the opportunity for the person to expand, or they'll ask questions about a certain line that may not be understood, because again, English is a second language, and most people are taking the proposals in English. So this sometimes can help if you have someone else review your proposal before you pitch it, someone with experience, especially for those pitches where you're learning something. So if I'm talking about assistive technology, I might ask Carrie Fisher to look at my talk proposal first. It's just the same as if you ask someone to review your resume or an essay. Ask someone to review your talk proposal. They'll catch typos. And they'll verify whether or not your proposal explains the scope of your talk and explains it to the benefit of your audience. So those second set of eyes is a good idea. And of course, that hook that we all need is we need a good title for our talk. We need that thing on the program that's going to make people interested, because we all know that none of us read anymore. Our program is on the phone and we're scrolling with our thumbs. And so sometimes all we see is that bold heading of the title of our talks as we're looking through the program. So you want to make sure that you think of something catchy, maybe playful, yet still explanatory. You want to be careful of too clever of titles. You want to make sure that your title can stand alone. This is also good for after your talk. If you use words in your title that people can search for, when they're looking for Drupal through Drupal TV, much like when you're doing a headline, you want to use words that people will look for when they're looking through the talks. So, even at small local events, people will read the title and choose based on that role alone without reading the blurb. For example, you don't want to do something like CSS and elephants. We all know that the PHP, is it? Maybe, I don't know. It has something has the logo of the elephant, right? So if you're talking about CSS and PHP, but you make it playful and talk about CSS and elephants, people might not understand that. See, I don't understand that title. I know that it references something, but I don't know what it references.
Writing your bio. When you submit a proposal or pitch to an event, you will most often be asked to include a short bio. Bios are often the hardest to write well, but we want to share a couple of good pointers with you. So they should always be written in third person. They should be succinct but descriptive. It should be only a short paragraph. Go for economy of words. Try to say the most you possibly can with the fewest words possible. Mention what your position or job is and any credentials that might be relevant. And mention how many years you've been in the field, or if it hasn't been that many, tell a story about how you've ended up in your field.
And I want to tag on to something Marjorie said about the mention your position or job and the credentials that might be relevant. Sometimes my bio changes depending on the talk I give. Mm-hmm. So if I'm talking about community, I might talk about being a mentor. If I'm talking about accessibility, I might talk about how I have a certification in accessibility. So not only can your bio change depending on the conference, but your bio might change depending on the subject matter of your talk as well. And that reminded me about pitches and bios being succinct. A lot of times these days I've seen where session organizers will limit the amount of words in your bio and limit the amount of words in your session as well. So that's something to think about when you're doing a proposal, is looking at the CFP and seeing if there's a word limit on those. Okay, go ahead, Marjorie. I'm sorry.
Thanks for adding that. Let's see. All right, so when you're writing your bio, it would be helpful to maybe look at some past examples for the conference that you're submitting to. Why are you the right person to give this talk? Is something that, it's something good to think about when you are writing your bio. Another thing is tweaking your bio so that your topic makes sense. So like Imogen said, like tailoring it to whatever conference that you're trying to talk to. I also find myself, I don't speak at very many conferences, but I'm sure I will more in the future. But what I always run into is not being a technical person, but wanting to speak at these conferences. I have to make it so it'll appeal to the audience, which is technical. And I lean on the fact that I try and help people tell stories. And I like stories. So that's always my angle, but of course it changes depending on who I'm talking to. You always want to remember to be human. Drupal camps are usually not too formal. I can second this. Everyone is very nice and relaxed at Drupal camps. And feel free to add something about your non-professional interests at the end, but don't make it your entire bio.
Okay, so transitioning into creating the actual talk. We're going to look at writing the outline and then optionally present the title and the outline. So this is another writing exercise, and this is something that you can do away from this group and think about the prompts and the things that we talk about now, or you're welcome to share it. I think we have another 40 minutes or so we'll have plenty of time. Okay, so think about the topic that you've picked, wherever you're at for now, it's okay, just pick any one of those and share it in the chat if you want to. Again, if there's a couple of them that you're not so sure about and you would like help honing in, feel free to share a couple of them, and other people will maybe pitch in about what they would like to hear about. Okay, so for the introduction of your talk, don't apologize or insult yourself, but if self-deprecating humor is your thing, that's perfectly okay. But sometimes apologizing in the opening of your talk calls attention to any flaws you may be concerned about, and reduces the positive engagement of your audience. So make sure that, if you do have that self-deprecating humor, that you make that apparent, but usually if you're that type of person, it's usually shines out, but try not to apologize or insult yourself. Do not spend 10 minutes talking about yourself or talking about your resume. Sometimes new speakers might be inclined to begin their talk about their hobbies or their family or their work history. And the trouble with this is, before you begin talking about your content, audiences aren't emotionally invested in you yet. So spending excessive amounts of time convincing them why they should pay attention to you is far less effective than opening with the engaging content that they're there to see. And recently there's been this push, or sort of like people kind of chattering about your introduction slide and not really having that and spending a lot of time on it, because people have already read your bio in the program. And that's a balance though, sometimes people haven't read that, so kind of use your best judgment. Sometimes starting with a relevant story is helpful. Talk about why you're giving the talk. You can tell a story about a problem you encountered to lead into a talk about how to solve similar problems. You're not talking about yourself, you're not talking about your resume, but you're talking about that solution you're going to be providing. So sometimes prompting it with the problem that you had is the best way to introduce that solution. Summarize what you'll cover and what the attendees will walk away with. This gives a high level context of each part of your talk and how it falls into your larger topic, because sometimes people will come not knowing if they're interested. And if you cover what you're going to talk about in that first 10 minutes, it allows the attendee the opportunity to leave the session if it's not relevant to you. I think Bob calls it like the 2 feet, something where you can get up and leave, give your audience members the allowance to leave if it's not a topic that they're fully going to be engaged with. Sometimes you can have a friend introduce you. Sometimes conferences have, MCs that will introduce you to. Better than introducing yourself is asking someone close to introduce you, to give you praise and assign credibility, Okay, so now we're going to create an outline of the talk. This is, kind of a fast-paced exercise. So I invite you to go back and look at the slides, tomorrow or tonight or the next day or after you've slept on it a little bit. We're going to write down some of the main topics or story headings you'd like to cover. What is the main point you want to get across? What are some examples or supporting points that go to illustrate that main point? What would be a logical flow? And again, refer to those 5 W's and the H. You can use the who, the what, the why, the how, and the where questions to refine your topic and create the sections of your talk. And then another great tip is people think in 3s. So if you break it down to 3 main subheadings, that could be helpful and really kind of help you organize, what you're going to present. It goes back to that, deep dive on one thing versus, an expanded, an overly too broad of a topic. So, people think in 3s.
Imogen, Bob has a question in the chat. When do you create your talk? What level?
What does that mean, Bob?
Yeah, so I'm having problems with my computer right now, so. What I meant was, how far do you usually take your development of your talk when you're writing your proposal?
Okay, that's a great question, because I know from experience, I don't always write my talk first. I write the proposal and wait for it to get accepted, right? So when you're writing your pitch, sometimes that story of 3 is a good pitch. That way, you haven't written your talk yet, but you're just writing that proposal. It gives you those 3 points you want to get across. So yeah, like a lot of the times, I won't create a talk until it gets accepted. I'll brainstorm and have that dump and have that outline. And that way, if it gets accepted, generally you'll have, 4 weeks from the time it's accepted and until you present. So it gives you lots of time. So don't ever feel obligated to have exactly what you're going to talk about before creating your pitch. I'll give yourself some grace.
That's what I was really looking for. It was, how far do you take it when you're giving your pitch? Because typically what I'll do is no more than a rough draft and probably more like a good outline.
Mhm.
and write
Yep.
my pitch off of that.
Yep, exactly. And that way later too, if your talk does get accepted, lots of times the organizers towards the middle of the time between acceptance and presentation, they'll ask you if there's any changes you need to do to your abstract as well. So, they'll let you own the node that you can go in there and make some small changes as long as you're still going to talk about that same topic. But say you wrote out your topic and there's one more point you want to include and you think you want the audience to know, a lot of times you can go back there, or you can email the organizers and say, hey, I'd like to change my pitch a little bit. And most of the time they're perfectly fine with that, as long as you don't flip-flop the topic completely.
Gotcha.
Okay, so we talked about kind of the beginning of our talk, and we talked about what we're going to talk about in the middle, those 3 points. And for the conclusion, you really want to summarize what's been discussed. You want to talk about it at the beginning, you want to really go in depth in it at the end, and then you want to summarize what's been discussed at the end. Because what happens sometimes during your talk is people might be writing something down, or they may be, posting something on Twitter, your picture and that kind of thing, or they might daydream for a second. So tying it all back together at the end is a good way to make people think about what they just heard. So really review the main takeaways. Again, answer the so what question, why does your topic matter? You don't have to go over these in the talk, but in the slides, give resources that people might find useful. When you were writing your talk, what resources did you use? And then be sure to, give your contact information, an email or a Mastodon Twitter or Twitter handle, a LinkedIn profile, any way that people have any questions that they might want to ask, but maybe they were too timid to ask during a live presentation, or maybe there wasn't time, give them the contact information they need at the end, like you did at the beginning. Okay, I know we didn't really have time for this, but again, if you want to talk about the topic you picked, or let us help you pick one or two, chat is a great way to do that. And we're going to talk next about becoming a better speaker. And the reason we talk about becoming a better speaker, Marjorie will go into it, but sometimes organizers will ask for either a past talk that you've given, or for you to create like a short 5-minute video on your presentation skills. So knowing how to be a better speaker before you're a speaker is sometimes beneficial, because some conferences do ask for that snippet. And this is purely my opinion. I think it creates unconscious bias, and it shouldn't be allowed, because now the organizers know more about you and it can bias their selection process. But again, some people will ask for, past presentation link or a new snippet.
And we've got another question in the chat from Bob. So what is one of the best questions to ask yourself as you're finalizing your session?
No, I actually was just reiterating what Amy June said, but I didn't see on a slide, and that is, so what is one of the best questions that you can ask yourself.
Okay.
Evaluating your, as you're finalizing your session. Because if you can't answer that, or if you don't think your audience can, then you're off the
What's
mark.
the point? Yeah. Okay. So in this section, we will go over practicing your speaking, speaking do's and don'ts, handling nerves, handling Q&A, and getting post-talk feedback. So there are many tactics for practicing your speech. The most important thing you can do is practice when you are given a presentation, because the more you speak in front of a mirror or in front of friends or in front of a room of people, the more comfortable you are and the better you will become. You can even give your talk to a friend over Skype. You can record yourself, take notes on behaviors you exhibit while speaking, then practice reducing them. When you practice, time yourself. You might be surprised about how long or short your talk is when you're speaking out loud. And it's always important to know how long your talk is going to take. I also hate practicing. I also hate seeing myself or hearing myself. It's like, oh my God, I sound like that. I don't enjoy practicing or hearing myself. And I make really funny faces that I don't realize when I'm talking to. So I'm just like, oh God. If you are looking for opportunities to practice speaking, you might see if there is a Toastmasters in your area. They'll provide you with many opportunities to speak in front of a supportive group of people and give you tips and tools for improvement. I can also attest to this. I really like Toastmasters. I joined Toastmasters when I first started at Red Hat, and it was great. And it's a great way to learn how to think on your feet and meet people. You can also practice at smaller local events. Local Drupal events are good for practicing for Drupal Camps and DrupalCons. And you can check out DrupalCons.com to find ones close to you. And if you want to practice with others before stepping into a local Drupal event, you could find smaller related meetups that you might be interested in.
So Rolf had a question about using notes. So we will tell all our secrets. I utilize speaker notes. I use Google Slides because of the speaker notes. I can pull it onto a different screen while the presentation's up here. And depending on the topic, well, I'm verbose and I talk a lot. So I have a tendency to talk more than I should and my presentation goes too long. Or I'll talk about something that's going to be on the next slide. So to keep me focused, I will put bullet points down. And then if it's a talk I've never given before, I will practice it out loud and sometimes have basically the transcript written in my speaker notes. It keeps me on target. I also do it like for a workshop like this, or if there's two people giving the same talk, we tag team it. We used to do this for the multilingual initiative in Drupal, where Gabor would write a slide deck and then it would be templated in those speaker notes so anybody could hand off the presentation and feel comfortable doing it. So it's up to you what you put in the speaker notes. But for me, I always have my speaker notes in my screen in front of me. And then also it helps me stay focused on this screen versus like looking at the presentation, but I've seen some people like Herschel, he can talk about anything without the speaker notes, but like I said, I'm verbose. I have to stay on topic or, it just goes all I'm like.
And if you're nervous too,
Yeah.
I speak for myself, I start rambling too, and then might say something inappropriate just because I'm nervous. It's so weird how that happens, but I have to have a reference.
And I've seen some folks in-person conferences that like to walk the stage. Mm-hmm. But need speaker notes. So they'll do the note card thing. They'll have the clicker, but they'll have note cards with their 3 bullet points for each slide. So people know that you're nervous. People are okay, and lots of times people don't even know you're using your speaker notes. So it's kind of nice. But yeah, I utilize those if you need. I don't know how other content delivery works besides Google Slides to know how to share them, but I'm sure that all the software has speaker notes these days.
There should be a talk on how to lay out your computer setup, because San Francisco users group, I had my notes up here and then people's faces were down here, and I was like, God, this is a nightmare. But you live and you learn. So some do's for becoming a speaker. No matter how much public speaking experience you have, there's always room for improvement. So here are a couple of do's and don'ts to help you improve. Do speak slowly. Many speakers speak too fast. That can happen when you're nervous, but audiences almost never complain that someone went too slowly. Take pauses in between sentences. It may feel strange to you, but will seem very natural to the audience. Do have water available and drink it. We do. Most events will provide water for the speaker, but make sure you have water on hand for yourself just in case. And when you find yourself going too fast, take a drink of water. Taking a drink of water is a great way to help you like slow down and pace yourself. And it might feel like it takes you forever to take a drink, but the audience really doesn't mind. Vary your voice. This gets easier with practice. You don't want to speak monotone. You don't, don't want to bore people. Make sure you have inflections in your voice to vary your tone. You want to look at your whole audience and make eye contact with people if you can, but make sure you scan the whole room and don't just look at one part of the audience. One trick here is to locate some friendly faces in multiple sections of a big audience and then address them one at a time in a loop. Also, make sure the audience can hear you. If you aren't sure whether the mic or your voice is loud enough, ask the audience if they can hear you, and ask the people in the back to raise their hands if things get too quiet. I'm reading the chat quick. Yes, drinks and pauses are okay. People understand. Keep your hands above your waist. If you do this, you'll find yourself gesturing naturally. I'm very handsy. It helps me feel comfortable. Remember to breathe and practice without your notes. If you are somebody who does ramble, like Bob suggested, like having bullet points to kind of reference to keep you on track is great. But also just remember to keep that natural, like organic feel and try not using your notes as much.
And just in case the technology doesn't work for you and you can't get the speaker notes on one screen, it's good to have a general idea of what you're talking about. Because I have been places where there's been like where you have to mirror the screens and they can't figure it out. It's less and less nowadays as more conferences or technology is getting better. But yeah, practice without notes just in case you can't get those notes in a place that you can't reach, or print them out, something like that. Have a backup plan.
And also, I don't know if this is a do or don't, but if you do have a drink to help you, make sure you use the bathroom before, because if you have a small bladder like me, it could either be a good or a bad thing. Don't drink tons of water. I'm just kidding. Don't drink too much coffee. You're already jittery with nerves, so so you don't need a coffee buzz on top of that. Don't drink too much coffee. Don't drink too much water. Don't turn away from the audience. If you need to point something out in your slides, make sure that you keep your face pointed toward the audience as you point. Don't use filler words like which I have done very many times. It's common, it happens, but just try to be cognizant of pausing instead of saying which everybody does, so it takes time. You might not even notice you are doing this, so ask a friend to point out how many times you do it to help yourself break the filler words habit. Don't read your slides or notes directly. If you must, make sure you look up from the notes and ad lib at least a little bit.
I want to bring a personal experience that, see, I say a lot, and it's not as bad as you think it is. You know, if you listen to your recording and you do say a lot, don't have that be the determining factor of whether or not you're going to present, because a lot of people have lots of good information to present and will use ums. I have a tendency to use so, and my friend Mark was at Florida camp and he pointed that out, and then now I don't use it as often, but don't let that be the make or break point for you presenting, okay? Because people do want to hear what you have to say. And it goes back to handling nerves. You know, we're all nervous. You know, I've been public speaking for a long time now, and that's like kind of my number one job almost, is public speaking. And I get nervous every single time. It's part of me being human, you know. It's from our caveman ancestry, you know. Anytime that more than 5 pairs of eyes are looking at caveman, it meant in all likelihood you were going to die. So we still react in the same way when we get up in front of people and we see them all watching us, you know. So keep that in mind. You know, the audience is on your side. They want you to succeed. And all of them would be nervous if they were in your shoes. And in fact, it's okay to admit that you're nervous. You know, Marjorie always says, you know, this is like my 3rd time talking, or this is the first time me doing it at this group. You know, she lets people know, and it kind of helps bend her nerves a little bit too. And people will be sympathetic. So here's some techniques for handling your nerves. You know, again, you know, it comes to practice, right? But take time for yourself before you speak. This helps you compose yourself and get you mentally prepared. You can go for a walk, listen to your favorite music, go over your notes, take some deep breaths, know the stage, try to find the time before your talk, you know, if it's in person, to see the room where you'll be speaking. For me, generally, I'll try to go to the session before mine, because then I'm already in the room, right? I'm not scrambling and meeting people in the hallway, but then I actually have time to set up my equipment, to look at the lay of the land, and it helps me, you know, with not being as nervous. Using your own devices, insist on this. DrupalCon last year or this year, it was a mess at the summits. We had to use laptops that DrupalCon provided for us, and no one knew how to use the Windows machine. So have your own laptop, have your own clicker. You know, you'll be comfortable with your clicker because you've used it before. If you won't be using your own devices, again, come early and make sure you're able to get your notes onto the system and that you can use their system with ease. Sometimes, oh, there was an, now that I'm really self-conscious because we just talked about it, but adopting a persona helps me a lot. You know, it doesn't mean don't be yourself. It just means be the speaker version of yourself. If you tend to talk with your hands, when you're nervous, really embrace it, you know, make it a part of your speaker persona. You will behave differently when you're in a big group of people, you know, just embrace that and don't fight it. And then be excited, you know, nervousness could actually be excitement. There's no chemical difference between feeling nervous and feeling anxious. It's the same physical heightened state. So if you think you're nervous, turn it around and remind yourself that you're just excited. And then dress comfortably, you know, especially if it's a more, you know, casual event. You don't want like your tight tie to be thinking about that tight tie the whole entire time you're presenting. You know, wear something that you would normally wear every day. If buying a new outfit helps you feel better about yourself, do that, you know, but be comfortable, basically. This is the second slide of the same thing. So see how like practicing in front of people like helps you to like I'm writing all the things down because we haven't given this presentation for a while. So slide 87 is redundant.
I love this.
And I do that when I'm presenting too. I'll be like, oh, there's a typo. Okay, I'll be fixing that. I do it kind of breaks that monotony of the presentation. I'm going to share about something that we just did, Marjorie, about the Mountain Dew. So she was human. She's like, we have got to take a break because I had a Mountain Dew and I really need to use the facilities. One, it was funny, everyone laughed, and it gave everyone the bathroom break that we needed during a long presentation. But it was that being human and being comfortable. And handling Q&A, you know, many talks have an audience with questions and answers at the end. And sometimes I know for a lot of women or people from marginalized communities, this can be the make or break for us wanting to present in front of people. Timing, you know, ask the organizers in advance what the expectations are for Q&A. So time your talk when you rehearse and make sure that you've left room for an adequate Q&A. If there's, you know, if that's something you'll be expected to do, you know, how much time should you allow? If the organizers haven't specified it, you know, maybe it depends on the length of your presentation or the whole session in general. So generally, you know, for a 45-minute presentation, 10 to 20 minutes, 20 minutes being on the really long side, you know, maybe a panel discussion will be 20 minutes, but 10 minutes is an adequate Q&A for a 45-minute session. So give yourself 35 minutes of talking and 10 minutes for Q&A. You can also intersperse Q&A. You know, some people prefer to take questions throughout their talk rather than holding them until the end. You know, just let your audience know upfront what you prefer, but keep in mind your audience, depending on the size of the room, may need a microphone. So if it's a type of place where there's a microphone, have a friend or have a moderator help you and let them know that you want to do Q&A interspersed. Don't forget to ask for questions. You know, if you're saving the Q&A till the end, don't forget to do it once your talk is done. Or when you conclude a section of your slides, you know, maybe you did the breaking it up into threes after each segment, go, are there any questions before I move on? Sometimes having a slide at the end that says questions helps remind you that, that you're saying thanks and you have questions. And then repeat the questions back to the audience, you know, if they're in chat, you know, in a Zoom presentation, or if you're in a room where the audience doesn't have a microphone, repeating the questions before answering them will help people who may watch the video later or someone in the room who may be hard of hearing. And even if the audience and recording can hear the questions, sometimes it's nice to repeat the question for everyone to hear again, or rephrase the question more clearly, because some people will ask a very long question that could be reduced to a few words. So repeating it can be helpful. And there's tricky questions, you know, speakers who are brand new to public speaking, and even the ones who aren't brand new, are often nervous about getting asked a question where they don't know the answer or that has a tricky answer. And there's a couple of ways you can deal with this. You know, remember, repeat the question back to the audience. This can buy you time to think about the question a little bit or handle the answer. Don't be afraid to admit that you don't know. People would much rather hear that you don't know the answer than for you to pull it out of your behind. So admit that you don't know it. You know, say something like, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. You know, let me look into it for you. Could you send me a tweet, or could you email me after the session? And you can also lob it back at the audience. You know, I don't know the answer to that. Does anyone in the room know the answer? And that can create a little bit of a discussion. Sometimes it's helpful for me when I first got into accessibility that I'd have one of my accessibility cohorts and friends or colleagues in the audience, and I could throw knowing that they might know the answer. That made me feel a little bit more confident having a colleague, you know, trusted colleague that might be able to answer the question for me. You know, hey, April, do you have any ideas on this one? But before you do that, make sure that they're okay putting them on the spot, and they're just not, you know, at the end, they're like, whoa, I didn't know you were going to ask me that question. So there's the smarty pants. These are the people who don't really have something to say, but they think they know better than you and goes on and on and on. And this is a big fear for some first-time speakers. It doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, other people in the audience are thinking about how much of an idiot that know-it-all is too, and not about how you're handling it. So don't be afraid to cut someone off if they're monopolizing the Q&A or derailing it. It's possible to do this politely but firmly. I think we're going to have to move on, for the sake of brevity. I really want to get a few more questions in. You can be tactful. The unrelated questions. Sometimes people will ask questions that are just way out of left field, that have nothing to do with your talk, and answering the question will derail the conversation or take you in a direction that really isn't appropriate. And one way to say that, if that happens is, hey, that's a good question, but it's outside of what I'm talking about. I'd be happy to talk to you about it in the hallway or at the after party, or you can email me. Don't be afraid to tell people it's out of the scope. And then there's always silence, right? Me and Marjorie have had a lot of silence tonight when we ask questions, and that's okay, right? It's okay to have silence when you want people to ask you questions too. You finish your talk. There's a couple ways you can do this. You can have that trusted friend or colleague in the audience ready to ask you a question or even chime in with a different angle. Maybe you're a developer and you have a designer ready with like some kind of observation on your topic from a different point of view. You can also ask and answer your own questions. Something we didn't go into a lot, but I'm kind of curious about, and then answer it. Or you can ask the audience a question. I didn't go into depth in the talk, but you might be wondering about is, or maybe you'll say a question I've come up with beforehand is. But going back to having that person in the audience, sometimes people just don't want to be the first one to ask a question. So having someone there to ask the first question kind of lubricates the way for everyone else. So that's, it's not that people don't care about your topic, but they maybe just don't want to be that first person to ask the question. And I did this with Marjorie at Drupal Camp Asheville. After her talk was kind of quiet and I asked my question, and then all of a sudden everyone else asked a question too. So it really does work having that friend or colleague in the audience. Mistakes happen, you read your notes wrong, or you're just nervous and you just say something completely opposite. You don't know why it happens, but don't be afraid to correct your errors after your talk. Someone might point out an error. Maybe technology has changed or best practices has changed. Maybe they'll point it out, in Q&A or afterward. Go ahead and update your presentation online and include the correction if you give the same talk again. Be sure to verify that the correction is actually correct before you do it. Don't just take their word on it. Make sure that you do a search and make sure that they're not misspoken either. And Marjorie's going to go over the last part of the presentation real quick because we're almost out of time, about creating the actual slide deck.
All right, so we will, like Amy June said, go really quickly over what makes a good slide deck, good presentation, contact info, feedback, and more tips you might find useful. So the first tip is to have a theme. This could be something just that's visually unified, and when people look at your presentation, they're like, that person knows what they're talking about, and it emphasizes your tone. So you don't want styles that are kind of all over the place. You want the entire presentation to look like a story. Many speakers end up with something that looks like, many speakers end up with the look to their slides that they stick with from presentation to presentation. This is great. It makes their talk stand out and feel a part of like a cohesive set. And it may not be the best route you want to go, but it's something to consider. Don't use a default slideshow theme like the templates that come with Keynote or PowerPoint, because we've seen them all and people know what they look like and it's predictable and it takes the fun out of it. So make the presentation you. Don't write out what you're going to be saying. This can be a flexible rule for useful, important quotes, but nobody likes someone reading lines from a slide. I'm going to call myself out here because of the way I have my computer laid out right now. It's not fun to always hear somebody, you know, they're reading line for line. So put something on the slide that's visually engaging and say what you need to say, but captures, like keeps the people's attention as you're saying what you need to say. Don't put everything, don't copy your notes on the slide that people are looking at. Not fun. Don't use too small text. I don't even know if people can even see that, but make your text size readable. Think of the person sitting at the back of the room and try to use 20-point font and larger when you can. Use code sparingly. It's hard to sit through pages and pages of code on a screen. And include a slide at the end of your deck to thank your audience. You can also use a closing slide to remind you to do your Q&A. This is so cute. I love this picture so much. Enhance the mood of your talk with slides and use them to add humor and to help get your point across. Dogs and cats are always very helpful with this. Check the copyright on all your images. If you're using a Creative Commons graphic, remember to give yourself proper attributions to its creator.
And this can be done in line or at the end of your presentation, you know, just as long as it's there somewhere.
Right. Consider sketching something original, creating your own images, or using your own photography. Make it personal and unique. I'm sorry, I love this. I've been in many presentations where people have done this. I forget this person's name, but he's an illustrator and he drew all of his slides, and it took a lot of time, I could tell, but it was something that he said he enjoyed doing, and it was something that I could tell that the audience really enjoyed while they were looking at his presentation. So that's always a good route to go, and it shows that you put a lot of care into what you're going to be talking about. Check your contrast, excuse me, on a range of screens to make sure it'll be legible. Think about colors. You can see that red is like almost like giving like a trippy feel. It's funny how colors work like that. So consider your choice of color. You can check color contrast using an online tool to make sure it'll be readable. And you just plug in your background and foreground color codes, and the tool will tell you if it's the acceptable range. Take care when selecting fonts. Don't use a fancy font that's cute but unreadable, and don't use too many different fonts together. Wow. I'm looking at this image for the first time, like I haven't seen it, and this is, I can't imagine a whole presentation in that. I mean, it's cool, but I can't imagine looking at that for 30 minutes. And make sure you're creating your slides for the right screen size. Try to find out in advance what aspect ratio the projector will have. Stay away from edges of the screen to be safe, and keeping key information out of those areas, and remember to save room for captions. Now, let's take a few examples.
I want to
Oh, go
add
ahead.
something to the slides, because we didn't do this on a couple of the slides, and I've noticed it is depending on how the sessions are recorded, it's generally a good idea to leave the bottom fifth for captions. That way, if YouTube puts on the captions, it's not covering up the information behind the slide. And with saying that, anything that's on the slide, because people sometimes can't see the slide, make sure that if there's any information, that you cover it out loud. Like how at the beginning of the presentation, I said there's images, but they don't add any content. But if you do have an image that adds content, definitely describe a graph or whatever. If it enhances the mood, describe those. It might take longer, and it's something to take into consideration, but think of the viewers who are only accessing it, you know, through hearing it, you know, that kind of thing.
I've seen good presentations where their slides don't even have words on them. It's just a picture, and they've either memorized it or, you know, they have a note card. So it is good for participants who rely mostly on hearing than they do visually. And it makes for a more, sometimes it can make for a more interesting talk. And some more tips. Practice going through your deck using an external monitor, using a presentation mode, which lets you see your notes, but also make sure that your screens are divided correctly, so you're not losing your notes. Bring a backup of your slides with you on a thumb drive, including any special fonts you've used. Save the presentation in a few different formats, including PDF. Upload your slides before you talk if possible, and include a link to them at the end of your slides. SlideShare and Speaker Deck are two good services where you can upload slides. Remember to tweet out the link afterwards and send it to the event organizers so that they can post it if they don't already do this themselves. If you start to do more speaking, invest in a presentation clicker to advance your slides without having to use a keyboard or mouse. I personally think TED Talks are really cool for this reason, because everybody looks just super cool and smart when they're walking across the stage, and they're not even like, they're just like click, next thing. It's just so smooth. And live demos. It can be very tempting to do a live demo and hop back and forth between your demo and the slides. This can be hard to watch, especially if something goes wrong during the demo, as it often does. Consider recording these bits instead and embedding the videos with your presentation.
Okay, so we're almost done. We're going to talk about the conclusions of our slide decks and call to actions. Again, you want to summarize what you've talked about. You know, talk about those key takeaways, talk about the headings, if it was a written outline or an article. My cat is like buzzing around, my other cat. Again, like Bob said, answer that so what question. Why does your topic matter? Give those resources to your attendees, and then be sure to give them your contact information. And a good example of that would be, you know, we do a writer's workshop, and this is our call to action at the end. You know, want to write for opensource.com? Here's the QR code that takes you to the action page. And then there's where you can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn. This is a good call to action slide too. This is off of the same writers workshop that we work with. You know, we talk about all our different sites. We have the sites and we have the links to them. And then we have a resource page. And that's how you kind of conclude, is like you do your Q&A, and you can either flash through these slides at the end with your call to actions and your resources, or you can talk about your resources. And then here's our thank you slide, which is very true. This is an old slide from a WordCamp presentation, but you can see that I'm thanking the audience, I have the other call to actions. We have a help channel on, WordPress, DDI, session help, so anything that you want to conclude. And this was supposed to be our concluding slide, but again, we all don't always update our slide decks before we give them again. There was something else I wanted to talk about, but now I forget. So I'll think about it and maybe post it in the meetup. But that kind of concludes the formal part. And me and Marjorie are always happy to read session proposals, or if you have a question about anything, if you want to start a conversation with us, we'd love to help. Even if it's you have 3 topics and you just want to refine them down without doing it in the chat here, we're more than happy to help people, figure that out.
Yes.
Cool. I think everyone should unmute yourselves and give them a great round of applause. Yay!
Hey,
Very good. Very, very good. I'm going to stop the recording now, if that's okay. As soon as I can find it. Where the hell is it? Yay, yay. Stop recording. There we go.